I'm Stephen Weigel, and today I'd like to talk about a certain technique I use. Now, the title of this video is called Disturbing Your Context. It has to do with a specific technique I'm using and when it should be used in xenharmonic ear training, since you're often shifting around your categories of what's supposed to belong where. Sometimes what I'll do is, if I'm playing something, say, I'm playing the C major pentatonic scale from 12-tone equal temperament. So I have the 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 1. I can compare that to 5-tone equal temperament, because I have a 15-tone keyboard here. And that's kind of a different sound, as you can tell. You can tell that all the steps are equally spaced. So 5-tone equal temperament is a fairly easy scale to train because it doesn't have very many notes. But it's highly xenharmonic because it falls out of those slots that you're used to in 12-tone equal temperament. In my videos, you'll see situations where if I'm approaching a destination in xenharmonic ear training, a different strategy, I will have, say, an interval in 12-tone equal temperament and try and sing different numbers of whole steps and half steps in it, or different numbers of large steps and small steps, depending on what you're doing. But sometimes you don't want to do that. So this is talking about situations where, say, if I was playing in 5-tone equal temperament and was trying to internalize it as a mode, I wouldn't want to be playing the C major pentatonic scale, because it would sort of disturb things. In general, you want to be comparing intonations when you are more experienced, in general, because that can seriously throw you off if you're new to the topic. So, you want to compare intonations if you want to improve your singing of small differences, and if you feel comfortable with that, if you feel comfortable hitting on notes within, a 30-cent area, as long as you have pitch matching material with you. If you want to improve that, if you want to experience switching between tunings, and you're specifically practicing for that, so if you're practicing polysystemically, that would be what that's called. You would also want to do it if you're confident in remembering the correct intonation of a note. Sometimes I find that I'm not confident, and sometimes I find that I am. It depends on a lot of different factors that have to do with familiarity. Basically, if some sort of mode you're trying to internalize is quite xenharmonic, that can go either way, because if it's xenharmonic and thus distinctive in a way that you remember it, then you may feel more comfortable with it in general and not need to check it as often. Like, I feel that way about sharp perfect fifths, certain kinds of just intervals, things like that. But if it's xenharmonic and very unfamiliar, that will probably make you more unsure. So, in cases when you're really, really unsure, of course, and you think you're very off, it's good to simply stop and check with the intonation that you sort of have learned and know best, which is probably 12-tone equal temperament. So, that's sort of what xenharmonics in general does to the whole situation. So, for example, if I heard this for a while, I can maybe stop on some of the notes and see if they're correct. And then if I keep doing that and things just aren't right, slowing down, holding, and comparing to the 12-tone equal temperament version. But that would be really the only situation in which you would want to disturb the context if you feel like you haven't got it down. Most of those other situations have to do with you feeling comfortable with singing small intonations and internalizing modes, and that whole process in general. That's a lot of what microtonal ear training is, right? If you have 7 notes in the diatonic scale, you're just internalizing those 7 notes and figuring out their roles. And then microtonal scales do a similar thing, except the roles are not standardized, unlike in the diatonic scale. But you can memorize how 5 different notes sound, or 6 different notes sound, or 7 different notes sound. And then 8 and 9 are pretty hard, and 10 is probably considered too chromatic to be in a mode, I suppose, but there are real exceptions to that, like Blackwood 10 being a great example. So, that's a topic for another day, but now I'll describe situations in which you don't want to disturb your context. Now, you don't want to disturb your context if the sound world is a fairly simple mode, you are new to it, and you're trying to internalize it, and you're trying to learn it long term. Those are situations where you don't want to spoil it. So for example, if I was trying to learn 5-tone equal temperament for the first time, and I was new to xenharmonics, I would want to just play in 5-tone equal temperament, and see if I could hum along comfortably, because then I'd forget about 12-tone equal temperament for a while. Checking it against 12 spoils your tendency to hear it as natural, because you sort of have to get used to something. I've noticed that when I play xenharmonic music for people who aren't acquainted with it, it's actually very easy for them to get used to internalizing a mode in a very short amount of time. In other words, they can sort of hear it as maybe sounding diatonic even if it's not, or they hear all of the notes as belonging to a small set of them. So that's really what you're doing here. And being new to that really won't hinder your skill with that too much. It's just that if you play something from 12 equals intonation, which you might be more used to, it will spoil the effect. So, yeah, if I was trying to learn 5-tone equal temperament, I would only want to play in 5-tone equal temperament itself. Do, do, do. Ah, see, I'm a little wrong. Do, 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 do. And then just trying to get all of those different notes individually as part of the equal pentatonic scale. Another great example of a mode that you can learn to internalize is 7-tone equal temperament, or the pentatonic scale in 7-tone equal temperament. Personally, I find internalizing 7-tone equal temperament as a 7-note mode or entity to be much harder than internalizing its pentatonic scale, which is similar to 12 equals, but where the thirds sound a lot more Eastern. So you can do that as well, although my keyboard really isn't set up for that. Yeah, so anyway, if you have a small number of notes, you can internalize that mode and sort of know where the notes are, and then if you're new to it, you want to not play 12-tone equal tempered intonations against it, because you want it to sound normal and you want to get used to it in your ear in order to learn it. So hopefully this was helpful in discriminating between those kinds of circumstances and figuring out when you should just play intonations from another tuning system to compare. Basically, you just want to be really comfortable with singing different intonations before you do that, generally.